Welcome to the shadows. This is Mrs. Sinister, where terrifying tales lull you to sleep. Theo had never thought much of himself. At 25, with no degree and few connections outside his mother's side of the family, he was just glad to have work. His uncle had managed to get him a job through a cleaning agency, and he found himself assigned to an elementary school tucked inside a sleepy neighborhood not far from the city limits. The campus was fairly small, made up of 4 main buildings and a covered court. Most of the teachers were polite, some a bit distant. The students didn't pay him much attention. Every morning, he arrived before the sun. He swept, mopped, wiped windows. He cleared the trash bins and occasionally helped the guards move supplies. He found it peaceful, if monotonous. He never liked school growing up, but seeing the little kids run around, shouting and laughing, made him feel a strange sort of envy. He didn't resent them. Not really. But he sometimes wondered what his life would have been if he had finished high school, gone to college. Still, he didn't complain. He knew how rare stable work could be. His shift stretched into the evening, especially on days when events required extended hours. He didn't mind. It paid a little more, and the campus at night was quiet, but not always silent. Now and then, he would hear loud bangs echoing from one of the classrooms, sometimes running footsteps on the second floor. He would check and find nothing. No open windows, no misaligned chairs. He shrugged it off. Kids probably playing games, or maybe sounds just carried weirdly in old buildings. He didn't scare easily. But something happened one afternoon that broke the rhythm. He was finishing up the hallway on the first floor of the main building. The sun was beginning to set, casting gold against the windows. As he turned a corner, mop in hand, he saw a boy walking out of the boys' restroom. The kid was soaked from head to toe. Water dripped from his shirt and shorts, puddling on the floor. His hair clung to his forehead, and the expression on his face was oddly blank. Theo frowned, annoyed. Wet floors meant more work. He watched the boy walk past without saying anything. He recognized the kid, not by name, but by appearance. Tall for his age. Maybe grade 6. Acne clustered on his forehead. He had seen him in the halls before. He muttered under his breath, grabbed the mop bucket, and started cleaning the trail of water. Not even an hour later, there was a commotion near the school gate. A teacher was speaking urgently to a group of security guards. A car idled nearby, a parent's vehicle. Theo glanced over as he threw a garbage bag into the bin. Apparently, a student hadn't shown up for dismissal. His parents were there to pick him up, but no one could find him. Teachers were confused. Classmates said he wasn't present that day. The guards claimed they didn't see him enter the school grounds. When asked, Theo said he saw him, the tall boy with acne, dripping wet. He gave the time, described what he saw. The teachers looked at each other uneasily. They reviewed the CCTV footage. No sign of the boy. Not in the hallways. Not in the restroom. Not at the gate. Not anywhere. One of the teachers whispered that the student had been absent for 2 days. Theo said nothing more. A police report was filed. The search widened. Posters were printed. Classmates spoke about bullying, Jokes gone too far, teasing that had become cruel. Teachers whispered about how withdrawn the boy had become. Days passed, then a week. Theo walked past the bulletin board one morning and saw a fresh sheet pinned between announcements. The boy had been found. His body had surfaced at a lake miles away. The article said he had jumped from a bridge sometime during the night of his disappearance. A note was found in his school bag, but its contents were not revealed. Theo stared at the photo. The same acne-covered forehead, the same tall frame. The boy had died before Theo had seen him. He sat alone in the storage room during lunch, staring at the floor, unable to explain what he had witnessed. The details haunted him. The water, the silence, the way the boy had walked, unblinking, without looking at him. He told no one. But after that day, Theo found himself watching more closely. He began to notice things he hadn't before. Kids who walked with their heads too low, students who sat alone for lunch. He didn't intervene, but he reported what he saw to the teachers. Once, he stopped a younger boy from locking another inside a supply closet. Another time, he slipped an anonymous note into a counselor's inbox about a group that picked on a quiet classmate. He still swept the floors, emptied the bins, and mopped the halls, but he kept his eyes open, just in case someone else walked out of a restroom soaking wet, long after they were already gone. Ricky had never imagined cleaning would be his first job after college. Armed with a business degree and a fading sense of pride, he swallowed every bit of it when his uncle offered to get him a janitorial job at Northgate Mall. It wasn't even a day job, it was a closing shift. When the mall turned into a dim, echoing shell, he was one of the few left behind, sweeping out crumbs, hauling out trash bags, and putting up the rope barriers that funneled the remaining cinema-goers straight out of the building. The job wasn't glamorous. He arrived at 4 in the afternoon, wearing a worn-out uniform that smelled faintly of bleach, his ID clipped to a lanyard he hated. He stayed until midnight, most nights, sometimes past 1 in the morning. After the final full show of the cinema let out, his last task was always the same: close off the escalators, pull down the shutters of unused floors, and set up the velvet rope barriers leading from the cinema wing straight to the exits and the parking lot. No one was supposed to roam freely after the final screening. The first few weeks passed without incident. Ricky cleaned silently, mopping under flickering lights, sweeping food courts emptied of chatter. Sometimes he'd hum to himself. The echo would trail down the corridors and make him feel less alone. The security guards, though not particularly friendly, didn't bother him much. One of them, Tony, was especially strict, always checking his logbook and muttering reminders to keep off his phone during duty. But it was a job. It paid. Barely, but enough to help his mother and keep his pride intact in front of relatives who would ask how his career was going. Corporate janitorial operations, he sometimes said, half joking. The mall at night felt different. The walls hummed more. The escalators, though turned off, would creak now and then. There were sounds in the silence. Metal clanks, soft taps, groans of machinery behind walls. He ignored them. All malls had quirks, he thought. Then came the Tuesday night he wouldn't forget. It was nearly 1 in the morning. The last moviegoers were trickling out of Cinema 6, laughing, checking their phones, some arguing over the plot of the film. Ricky stood at the rope barrier he had just fastened. It created a clear path. Turn left for the exit, straight for the parking lot. Every other path was off limits. That's when he saw him. A man, alone, walking casually in the opposite direction. He had stepped over the velvet rope and headed toward the far corridor where the restrooms were. Restrooms that had already been locked and cleaned. The man didn't run. He didn't even look hurried. He wore a long gray hoodie, his head slightly bowed, his hands at his sides. He walked like he belonged there. Ricky blinked, unsure if he had imagined it. He stepped forward, called out. The man didn't stop. Ricky hesitated. Maybe it was someone from the cinema who really needed to go. He jogged after him, calling out louder this time. No reaction. By the time Ricky reached the corridor, the man had already turned into the men's room. The door was ajar, even though Ricky swore he'd locked it earlier with the master key. He stepped in cautiously. It was dark inside, too dark. Only the emergency light glowed faintly, casting long shadows across the stalls and sinks. The air was heavy with a foul, sour smell, and the tiles were wet, not with water, but something darker, thicker. Ricky froze. There was no one. He called out again, voice cracking. Nothing. He checked the stalls. Empty. He turned back toward the exit, his heart pounding harder now. Maybe the man had left already, and he just hadn't noticed. Maybe it was a prank. He reached for his phone to call security. That's when the screaming started. It didn't come from the corridor. It came from the walls. High-pitched, gurgling, choking screams that echoed all around him. It sounded like someone was being torn apart inside the ventilation system. Ricky stumbled back, knocking over the mop bucket, his hands shaking. He bolted out of the restroom and ran down the corridor. He didn't stop until he reached the security desk. Tony and two other guards stared at him, confused and suspicious. Ricky stammered something about a man in the restroom, screams, an emergency. The guards looked at each other, then at the monitors. There was no one. They rewound the CCTV footage. There was Ricky at the rope barrier, standing still. Then, suddenly, he turned and started walking toward the restroom corridor. Alone. No one ahead of him. No one crossed the rope. He walked like he was following someone, calling out to thin air. Ricky watched in horror as he saw himself enter the restroom. A full minute passed. Then he burst back out and ran like a madman toward the camera. Tony scowled. The other guards whispered. One of them asked if he was high. Another said he'd be reported. Ricky didn't sleep well that night. His mother noticed the bags under his eyes at breakfast. He said nothing. He returned to work the next day. He had no choice. He needed the money. Old Core had always been part of the school. No one remembered the day he was hired. He was just there, always had been. His real name, if he ever had one, had faded into the cracks of time and conversation. Everyone, students, teachers, even the principal called him Old Core. Some joked he was there before the first classroom was built. Others claimed he was part of the original construction team, but simply never left. Whatever the truth, Old Core belonged to the school in the same way dust settled in the corners and chalk clung to the blackboards. He was wiry and bent, his back a slow curve over years of sweeping and scrubbing. His hair was more cobweb than silver, his hands the color of the floor polish he used religiously, yet his movements were steady, deliberate. He cleaned without noise. He walked without echo. He lived in a small, crooked room behind the school gym, a forgotten custodian's quarters with peeling paint and a mattress as old as himself. Few people had been inside, and those who had described it as strange, full of strange objects. Bottles filled with cloudy liquid, faded photographs of empty places, scraps of rope and bones of small animals dried and nailed to the wall. Old Core spoke very little. When he did, it was often to himself. He didn't complain. He never asked for raises or holidays. He swept the halls. He mopped the bathrooms. He oiled the door hinges. He kept the school running like some old machine that only he understood. In storms, he sealed windows before they shattered. During floods, he unclogged drains like it was second nature. During the night, when the building groaned and whispered, he was the one who walked through it without fear. Students made jokes. They said Old Core talked to the shadows, that he didn't need a flashlight because the dark knew him. One rumor claimed a student once saw Old Core standing in the empty courtyard during a lightning storm, head tilted to the sky, whispering to the thunder. The teachers rolled their eyes at these stories, but even they made nervous glances when Old Core passed. More than one teacher had mentioned seeing shapes move in the windows after dusk, footsteps where no feet walked. Some heard scratching behind the walls. Lights turned on by themselves. Others had dreams about the school, about doors that shouldn't exist, stairwells that led down instead of up, blackboard writing that erased itself. When these things happened, people would nod and mutter, "Old Core will handle it." And sure enough, the next day, things would be normal again. But the school had one rule: never stay past midnight. It wasn't written, just understood. Everyone cleared out before 12. The night guards came and went quickly. Even the local cats that prowled the courtyard left before midnight struck. Then came the break-in. It happened on a Saturday night, just after 1 a.m. A call came into the police station. A concerned neighbor, an old woman living across from the school, said she'd seen several men climbing the school fence. Not kids, grown men, loud, stumbling, breaking glass. The police took their time arriving. Break-ins at schools weren't new, probably just petty theft or graffiti. They found the main door pried open, the glass shattered, and a trail of destruction. Lockers dented, chairs thrown, classroom supplies scattered. But what startled the officers wasn't just the mess. It was the noise. When they entered, the building groaned, not like wood settling, but like something alive and restless. The air was heavy. The lights flickered unnaturally, the fluorescent tubes buzzing with strange rhythmic pulses. Then they found Old Core. He was sitting outside the principal's office, legs crossed, a cigarette balanced between 2 fingers, the ember glowing in the dark. He didn't speak. He just looked at them with tired, patient eyes. One of the officers asked if he was hurt. He shook his head. Another asked where the intruders were. The sound came before the answer. Screaming. It wasn't the kind of scream born of pain. It was shrill, broken, the sound of someone coming apart. The police followed it to one of the classrooms. There, they found 3 men in their 20s curled into corners, one of them clawing at his skin, another sobbing incoherently, and the last one laughing a deep, terrible laugh that didn't belong to any sane human. The men had names. They had police records, drug use, robbery. One had been arrested for attacking a stranger with a broken bottle. The report labeled them extremely intoxicated, uncooperative, and possibly delusional. They kept screaming about shadows, about demons in the stairwell, about voices telling them to hurt themselves. They mentioned a woman in the mirror. They said there were dozens of them, spirits crawling on the ceiling, slithering through lockers, whispering in their ears. But strangest of all, they all insisted the same thing. They couldn't leave. They had tried. They ran for the doors, but they said the hallways changed. The exits moved. The windows wouldn't break. One claimed he saw a stairwell go down endlessly, no matter how far he ran. Another said he watched his friend melt through the floor like hot wax before reappearing again, screaming for help from the ceiling. And they all said the same thing about Old Core. He was there the whole time, standing at the end of the hallway, watching them. One claimed he tried to attack Old Core, but when he struck him, his arm went numb, as if it had hit solid iron. Another said he tried to run past Old Core, but ended up in the same hallway over and over, like the school looped itself around him. They accused the old janitor of summoning the things they saw. One of them was placed in a psychiatric ward after attempting to bite off his own fingers. He raved about children with sewn-shut mouths hiding in the lockers. 2 others were held in jail pending trial. Both hung themselves within weeks. The last survivor, the one sent to the institution, gouged his eyes out a year later and died from infection. The police never pressed charges. There was nothing to charge. The school reported damages. Insurance covered some of it. The janitorial closet was untouched. Old Core never asked for repairs. He swept up the glass, replaced the chairs, wiped down the walls. He never mentioned the incident, never acknowledged the break-in. When Monday came, he was back at work, quiet, unbothered, as though nothing had happened. The teachers whispered. The principal avoided eye contact with him for weeks. Some asked why the school didn't just retire him. But who would replace him? Who would live on the grounds? Who else knew every inch of the school? The pipes, the wiring, the hidden panels behind the library, the extra basement no one else had keys to. And what if removing him changed things? So he stayed. Years passed. Students came and went, teachers transferred, principals changed, but Old Core remained. Older, thinner, slower, but still sweeping, still mopping, still living in the same room behind the gym. Do you have a terrifying tale of your own? Send your story to officialmrssinister@gmail.com. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell. Sleep tight if you can. And remember, the things lurking in the dark are always watching.